How are you, man? I'm Gil Roth, and you're listening to a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. This is a COVID check-in episode where I record with a past guest of the Virtual Memories Show to find out how they're holding up during the pandemic. As far as how I'm doing, I'm all right. Yesterday was busy with both work and a couple of these check-in sessions, but I'm a little ahead on both of those now, so that's good. This morning, I got up around 5:15, as is my thing, and I went to the kitchen, as I always do first thing, to turn on the electric kettle for our morning pour-over coffee. And when I did that, I noticed the matte silver finish of the kettle was reflecting this really strong light from outside, just this band of white kind of vertically traversing it. And I looked out and saw there was this big, bright, full moon getting low in the west. So I went downstairs, got dressed, went out in the backyard, and looked at it and listened to the birds waking up. Because of the woods right behind our house and the high trees, I couldn't quite get an angle where the moon wasn't slightly obscured by branches, but I spent a couple of seconds walking around and tilting my head and trying to get that perfect clean view. And then the Zen bullet hit and I stopped and I gave up and I just took in the view that I had of this bright silver moon in the light blue of the morning. And by the time I made my coffee, it was already gone. So, let's get to today's guest. Cartoonist Karl Stevens is joining me from Boston, where he works as a security guard at an art museum. When he's not doing that, Karl's writing and drawing both long-form comics and gags for venues like the New Yorker. Karl was on, I guess 2 years ago at TCAF, the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, which would be held this upcoming weekend, which we talk about. And we also talk about our dear departed friend, Tom Spurgeon, and not having festivals and comic conventions to go to with Tom this year. Anyway, Karl's got this really fine line style, kind of reminiscent of Alex Raymond, the old Flash Gordon cartoonist, which when we get to it is why I goof on him, during the conversation about how he's getting into Jack Kirby's 1970s DC comics, because Kirby was the opposite of a fine line. They were very, very thick and blocky lines all over Kirby's work, especially in that era. Anyway, all you need to know is Karl's a cartoonist, both, again, comic strips and gag panels. And as far as caveats go, not a whole lot, except this one's just kind of two guys shooting the breeze about life and comics instead of life and death. And I guess that's something we need, right? Anyway, here's me and Karl. How are you dealing?
Great. Actually, my life has, like most other cartoonists, hasn't changed at all. I still have to go into the day job at the museum because I'm considered essential. Being in the security department, watching the cameras, but it's great because I get time and a half and there's nobody there. So I'm basically just drawing all day.
Is the museum closed or is it just people not coming? Okay. I wasn't sure if it was, well, people can take the chance, but
Oh no. Yeah. They've locked down all the museums in the Boston area, until probably, September. I mean, we get ominous emails from the operations department saying that we'll be paid through the end of the fiscal year, but like nothing beyond
none
that.
of you have looked to see when that fiscal year ends. That's always an issue.
Right. It's on June 30th. But then, but I mean, but all the events, all the concerts and everything have been put off until the middle of September.
Mm-hmm.
So we just
sorry, go on.
Oh no. So, I mean, so we all just assume that that's probably when the museum itself will open. But Massachusetts in general has been very cautious about how they're dealing with the reopening. Like they just mandated that everyone has to wear masks today. If you walk outside and you're not wearing a mask, I guess they're going to
beat you to
fine
death.
you, beat you to death, and then fine you for $300, which is interesting. Nice. Like how they're going to enforce that. I mean, are they going to? I mean, well, just ask for your papers.
As we see in New York, they tend to enforce that by class and color. So
right.
we'll see who actually gets penalized.
Right, exactly.
But, Boston in general,
white people are the biggest offenders.
Of course, Boston in general's been decent. Has there been any civic stupidity as far as you can tell, or are people pretty much grasping this is what we're in, we all got to do this?
It's all neighborhood by neighborhood. I mean, I walk to work. I like we live like in the harbor, basically. I mean, like downtown, and the museum is about like a 3-mile cross town. So I walk through like 3 or 4 different neighborhoods, and like that walk through like the bulk through like the city itself is everyone's pretty respectful. But then like around our neighborhood, which is definitely more gentrified these days, and like down towards like Dorchester and Southie, it's people are very just, I mean, like,
lax.
Lax. On Sunday, we like went for this bike ride down to UMass, like along the harbor, and it was like any other beautiful May afternoon. There were just people out, like, there were these like dudes playing that bro ball thing on the beach. It was like maddening, like just how like just no one was disregarding, or like how no one was regarding.
Yeah, and you can't even do you people are all going to die, because it's more like you people are going to get me sick. That's
well, that's just it. I mean, apparently, in like some neighborhoods in Cambridge, I guess there were a lot of masked vigilantes. I've like heard stories of just people just getting harassed for even just like lowering their mask for like a second. So
and I do feel bad. It was my pharma sector apparently that broke this out in Massachusetts. It was all Biogen having a strategic planning meeting at the Marriott on the Wharf, and that really just triggered everything. So sorry.
That's right. You were at that, man.
Luckily, as I told my trade association, there's a reason I haven't had a strategic plan meeting for 5 years, and now I know what that reason is, so that we don't turn into a super spreader. So really, it's just my laziness and inertia, but I do need to get on that.
I know it's crazy. Yeah, I think we're 3rd highest, right? Like New Jersey's number 2, right?
Yeah, we're head and shoulders past everyone. Then it's you guys in Michigan in the 3-4 slot, and it's
crazy.
You just look at the numbers, and they become abstract when you just look at numbers as opposed to people. Have you had any close either friends or family directly hit with this yet, or not?
Luckily not. There's a guy in our building that had it, and he has since recovered, but that was definitely a scare. I'm unfortunately on the board for the building. We like live in a co-op.
Yeah.
So it was all hands on deck. Like after we found out that one of the members had it, so we just upped all the, obviously just wiping down all the door handles and whatnot. So, but like we used to see him, like if we'd go outside for a walk and. We'd like see him in the window, like just kind of like just like longingly looking out.
I wish I could go out. But you guys didn't have any consideration about like burning him or anything. There wasn't any ostracization
for like a second, but it was for other reasons. I mean, he's been kind of a pain in the ass in the past. Like we had this huge. I mean, I shouldn't say much in the off chance.
No,
but like he's like definitely one of those. Like co-op members that likes to play ignorance. Is trouble, and almost cost us like a couple $1 million, but we won't get into that.
And now you've got this to hang over him. So
that's right.
So when it comes to doing the humor comics and the gags, you say you have a lot of time for cartooning.
Absolutely.
But working on humor that isn't like toilet paper or social distancing, is it tough finding jokes outside of the current set of things, or are you diving into that really and just figuring where you can go with hoarding jokes? I mean,
it's basically every joke is that, but I've tried to not, like recently, like the past couple batches, I've been trying to do more surreal stuff. I mean, just even as like a writing technique, just combining, well, like there's a Slack page for all the like New Yorker cartoonists, and someone compiled a list of all the cliches. So, and it's like 150 of them or something. So I've like printed it out, and I've just been trying to combine them all. I mean, even just to give me something, like as like a jumping off point, as like a trick to, get the brain working in that way.
Yeah. So almost a Mad Lib, just how do I combine column A and column B?
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like a Dadaist like exercise too. I mean, I need to like cut them up and just put them all in a hat and just pick up two.
Yeah, go out with Burroughs gangs too. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Because I'm sure Remnick will buy those in a second. So. But
yeah, reminds me. God, I think it was not Ken, as Bob Eckstein telling a joke about, not a joke, the time he was doing Look Day, and like Mike Wallace from 60 Minutes was sitting in and filming, and Wallace was trying to get the previous New Yorker comics editor to explain why something wasn't funny, because he found it hysterical. And it's like, why aren't you buying this one? Why aren't you buying that one? And he just, you don't understand. And Bob was realizing this isn't helping me when you tell him he doesn't have a good sense of humor.
Yeah, man. I know. I mean, I'm sure it's, I mean, there is like actually there isn't really like a formula to it, but it's like funny because like when I've been doing this almost 2 years now, and the like pile of like rejects is like pretty big, as you can imagine. But it's just funny like going through those, because I like resubmit a lot. I actually talked to Peter Cooper about that at the Spurgeon thing.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't really like resubmitting a lot of gags, but he was encouraging me to. But it's just funny to like look at the ones that do get picked versus the ones that don't, and it just seems so obvious. And I wish I could just train my brain into just getting into like the zone for the ones that get picked. Like there is like something there, like there is like that quality, but it's so. It's still so hard to make. I mean, I guess that's his creativity.
Yeah, but it's also creating for a specific audience. It's not just creativity. It's what do I create that fits, what they're looking for. So.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's like, was it Emily that said that? It was like they want your style in their voice. I'm getting that wrong.
Yeah, I think that was her phrasing. Yeah. But you found you can do humor and adapt to the current bizarro situation pretty effectively.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, it's more just trying to think of things that probably haven't been picked. I mean, everyone who's submitting is just fucking brilliant, so it's like hard to come up with something that they probably hadn't thought of like weeks ago. But I mean, yeah, it's I mean, you have to laugh at the situation like on some level. I mean, I understand that's a very privileged thing to say, but
that's the basic thing. Like everybody who's on here is like, I don't want to complain about anything because I know other people have it tougher. I'm like, we all know that. Yeah. We're all super privileged, all things considered. But,
yeah, and
feel free to vent.
Yeah, it is bad karma. But yeah, I mean, I've always had a pretty dark sense of humor, so this isn't, this is just the darkness has just overtaken. Well, I mean, it's like life's always been pretty dark, so it just seems that, even like the common people who aren't artists are now feeling the darkness. So,
And did you have any sort of difficulty in the transition when things first? I know you said you already lived a self-isolating world, but mentally, did it cause you any sort of jarring transition when we all went into that sort of shutdown mode?
Yeah, I mean,
it's tough to remember what March was like. I don't mean that facetiously. Like something that was almost 2 months ago feels like 10 years. But.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just all like it's all the usual things, like not being able to see friends or family. And I mean, my father already has like a respiratory problem. Like he was on, he has some difficulty with that. And so, I was just sort of worried about him and just, hoping that I could just see him again.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he'll be fine and like get through it, but but yeah, that's the most thing, is just not, just not being able to see. Cause we have friends that we would have over for dinner and, do things in the city, obviously like just going out to shows and, going to art museums, I mean, I'm glad that like my museum's closed, but, on my lunch breaks, I would go to like, another museum and look at paintings. So
do you get to go around inside your museum?
Oh yeah,
do you get to look at stuff?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I do. I mean, so it's given me like a new appreciation for that. Actually, I was texting with Summer about that. Like I was like sending her pics of the like museum at like, because it's all dark and spooky, and she was getting a kick out of that.
Nice. And the city in general has been. Is it any easier to get around? I guess I know you're not driving, but Boston's always been my most hated city to try to get around.
Oh, it's
easier with nobody on the road. Yeah,
well, we don't really drive anymore. We just drive to the grocery store like once a day. It's like a mile away, so it's not that big of a deal. But I mean, I've just been walking to work, and I've like kind of did that anyways. I mean, it's like 3 miles, and it's for the exact same reason you said that Boston's just a nightmare. I mean, even like the subway situation is completely bankrupt. I mean, it's like a 10-minute difference to like walk those 3 miles if and then like taking a T. So it's like,
and to feel like you're actually doing something and not getting exposed to
COVID. Yeah. And it's an exercise. I mean, you can relate to this. Just wanting to increase the like mileage, get 6 extra miles a day.
I ran over a mountain on Sunday. That was my thing.
Yeah, I saw that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was nuts. If you ever get out here, you'll understand how absolutely batshit crazy that run was. But,
yeah, really steep. Yeah. I mean, I sort of missed that. I mean, like we have family up in Vermont. Like Alex's cousins live up there, and like when we go to visit, like they live like right in the Green Mountains. So there's just all these like rolling, like beautiful hills. So like when we take runs, it's like the best thing ever. I mean, even though like you're dying going up this giant mountain, but it's, I don't know.
Oh, I'm hip. That's my day-to-day life out here. So
yeah, it's so cool.
And how's Alex dealing?
Fine. I mean, like she's working from home. So, she's actually really getting into it, liking not having to, go into the office. I mean, so,
and not sick of you because you're away.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I was here all the time, she would probably
have killed you.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point,
and I'm guessing so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a child. I mean, a lot to deal with.
40-year-old kid.
That's right.
I'll be a 50-year-old kid next year, so that's pretty good.
Is that because we don't have kids?
Oh yeah. Well, generally, it's the excuse we have. Although I found that people with children, there's a chunk of that too. That sense of, I know I've got a kid who I managed to like rear and get through college and everything, but I still don't feel like a grown up. And that's we realize it's not just us.
Okay. Well, okay.
Ask Emily. I guess she's got a 7-year-old. Ask her if she feels like she's, an adult or just somebody who's trying to figure out how to handle a 7-year-old. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I think there's an element to artists, being children, right? You have to keep that part of you.
I've got no excuse.
Burning. Oh my God. Speaking of, I've been like buying fucking comic books like crazy, which is dumb because I'm basically inviting, COVID into the house and, making like the postman do more work. But like I bought like all the Jack Kirby commandees.
Yeah. I always go commandy. I always went with that.
Yeah. It's bad.
They're batshit crazy.
Yeah.
Those comics are nuts. But...
They are. Like they're great. I mean, I've never really looked at Kirby that much, which is kind of crazy. That like it like took this long, but I like really love like the 70s work. I mean, the like Eternals and Commandy and all the Fourth World things.
But his visual style is the opposite of yours, or at least his lines are you would have to put all of your lines into one line of Kirby.
I guess that's it. I mean, I think that's part of it because I'm like trying to simplify. I've also been looking at like a lot of Al Williamson and Alex Raymond. I mean, I've looked at them more in the past few years, but especially Williamson, like. I got a book of all his Flash Gordon comics, and because I have like this sci-fi fantasy epic that I will do someday. So I bought it for that inspiration. But yeah, I mean, like even his work is, it's very simple. I mean, it's realism, and it's, there's detail, but there's a restraint to it. So I'm like moving towards that, I think. And also Michael Kaluta.
Yeah.
Like his work, that sci-fi series, Starstruck. I like bought the artist. I bought the artist edition of that, and so I've just been studying that too.
I forget who inked him on that, or was that his own?
That was him. It's all Kaluta.
Yeah. Oh God, he had such a great style.
He did, yeah. He does. Is he still alive? He's got to be.
I was just about to check. No, Bernie Wrightson's gone. Let me check on.
Yeah,
this is the one thing about doing these remote. Oh yeah,
yeah. Like that was like in the late '90s. It was this convention in Northampton, and actually like Peter Lyard was there too, selling like a post Turtle book that he did. What was it called? Like Planet Racers. It was just something that he self-published. But like sitting next to him was Bernie Wrightson, and it was at the Hotel Northampton, just like right downtown, and he was just hanging out. And, like there wasn't really anyone there, and I got to talk to him for a bit.
Yeah, that's got to be something.
Oh yeah, and actually like. I mean, like that year was pretty amazing. It was like '98 because like the Words and Pictures Museum was still open, Kevin Eastman's thing, and they would like always have events there, of course. And I remember there was a Los Bros Hernandez signing, and there were like 3 people there, so I got to like talk to Gilbert and Jaime for the whole time, and I'm sure they were super annoyed at 19-year-old Karl Stevens.
Oh, don't sell yourself short. I'm sure they're annoyed by you now too.
Absolutely, yeah. Just he's this psycho.
So yeah, I sort of wonder they're coping with this whole thing in Vegas and LA. But Kaluta is still alive, by the way. He's 72 and still kicking.
Awesome. So, sorry, Mike Kaluta. I think you're awesome if you're listening to this.
It's the one thing about doing these shows remotely instead of in person is that I can actually do little side references like this. I can go look online while we're talking, but that's really not as much of a benefit as I would like compared to the actual in person, thing.
No, I agree.
And you're working on a Spider-Man thing, or is that
I'm just playing around with it. I mean,
okay, I wasn't sure if it was an actual thing or you doing an exercise, because it seemed a little too loose for what a Marvel deal would be like.
Absolutely, yeah, they would never hire me in a million years. So I mean, I always toyed with the idea of getting some samples together and trying to do an odd job with them, but I don't know. I mean, it's like that kids. It's like there's that small part of me that still wants that. I mean, I think it's because like I grew up in like the 90s, and that's when I started reading comics, and like all that stuff got into my head. But like at the same time, I was really into like Mad Magazine and like underground comics. It was like this dueling kind of thing, And I think it's also just being working class and like just having the idea that like this is how you make money in comics. So I don't know.
Except you've met enough mainstream cartoonists to understand that is not how you make money in comics.
Yeah, exactly. So. I mean, I mean, it's a joke. I mean, it's like not the 90s anymore. I mean, like, if it was 1992, then maybe, but even then I think, like having the hindsight, it's like, I was, in my 40s then. I mean, I would be just doing something independent, I mean, Hate was selling what, like 30,000 copies every
30 to 50. It was something like that. And 8-Ball were around that 30 to 50,000, and they kept their art, which is nice.
Right, exactly. So you just have all that freedom, So
I'll tell you, I on Sunday on a whim pulled all the Invisibles, the Grant Morrison comic, out of my long boxes downstairs, and I still have I've about 10 issues left out of the 70 or so that they published. Still have no idea what the hell's going on, but I love the ads. I'm just going through these 1990s comic books and just all of these ads for these terrible bands and the deaf. Oh, there's all these music CD ads for Sam Goody's, all of these Deftones and Rancid and all of these things. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how terrible that era truly was.
Yeah, it was pretty bad for mainstream music for sure.
Yeah, it was something. But yeah, just going through all that stuff was kind of it's been entertaining, but just one of those. Well, that was an era I lived through, I guess.
Right. Well, do you know? I mean, speaking of, do you know that podcast, Cartoonist Kayfabe? With
I've seen it, but I haven't checked it out yet.
Oh my god, you should.
Yeah.
With Jim Rugg and Ed Piskor.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. I mean, they started off just doing deep dives into the Wizard magazines, issue by issue, but then it just sort of, in this beautiful organic way, just became just all about, comics in general. I mean, that was like their jumping off point. But they've had these like great interviews. Like they had one with Steve Bissette. It was like 3 hours long. That was pretty incredible. And then one with like Tim Truman recently. And they're definitely like the reason why I'm buying all these old comics too, because they'll like spotlight certain things, and but there's this like palpable like excitement, and
oh yeah, and putting yourself back in that era and remembering who you were when you were buying comics like that,
right.
with the 80s and 90s stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're also my age, so it's like that's part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got to be, at least there's some comps out there, people who, experience this stuff.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. But I mean, but like, what is that about comics and like nostalgia, right?
Well, that's why we need Tom. we really need Tom Spurgeon around to really delve into what that nostalgia is for. When he had the Comics Made Me Fat essay many years ago.
Oh yeah.
That sort of captured a lot of what it meant, because comics were a solitary activity.
Right.
They were sort of a community, but not like we have here. And it, there was a comfort to it all.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, do you remember like fandom from like the 80s? Like, did you like go to conventions when you were?
No, I never did.
Okay.
I was in North Jersey, so close enough to New York, but never really went to events. So,
okay.
Yeah, I didn't have that side.
Like, when did you start going? College?
I don't think, even in college, I just knew the other comics people. I think it was really like the early aughts. In my early 30s, I did San Diego twice. Late 20s, I went to SPX with Tom. That's right. 1998, I think, was the first time.
Dude, I was there in 98.
Yeah, we talked about that. And Eddie Campbell was there. And
yeah. Oh, yeah, right. Like the From Hell pages. Yeah.
I think Dylan Horrocks. Yeah, Dylan was there. And
he was the star of the show, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where my trip to New Zealand first began, in the one I took in 2003. All started with meeting Dylan and hearing, well, if you're ever in Auckland, mate, come on, I'll put you up. I'm like, hey, I would have somebody who would put me up. And years later, I took him up on that for a day and a half.
That's so funny. I like never like. I mean, I like think about that sometimes actually, because like every so often I'll have a dream about New Zealand. It's really strange. Like actually, like last night I had a dream like I was in New Zealand, or it was my dream version of what New Zealand is. And I like wake up like thinking about it, and then like the brain goes of course to like Dylan, but then also to you, because it's like fucking Gil like did that, you like left.
Well, I did 2 weeks adventure tour, drank with Australians, bungee jumped, did all this crazy shit, but I was single and essentially was able to get away and do my thing.
Yeah.
But I think it was really the last major trip I took that had, maybe the only one, that didn't involve family, friends, work, or anything else.
Wow.
That I just went somewhere solely for me. But
that's great. Are you going to talk to him?
I alluded to recording with him, and he didn't reply. So I'm sort of, as I start working through more past guests, I'm going to kind of hit him up again with, I know it's I think 12-hour time difference.
Oh, right.
But, it would be great to catch. I've got a pal in Australia I'm supposed to record one with, if we can figure out the 14 or 15-hour time difference, and the fact that he has like a 3-year-old, which that's part of it. That'll make it
parts.
Yeah, that's the challenging section. I'm like, I could be recording at 6, but I don't know how you're going to deal at 9 p.m. with the kid and everything else. So that we've got to iron out. But
for sure.
I'd love to talk with Dylan again, just to understand what he's going through there and how things are functioning, because apparently they handled this situation a lot better, but different culture, smaller country in general, smaller, more understanding of what it means to be in a community. That you all have to.
Yeah, they're just nicer. you know, and like they have and like, you know, they have actual leadership.
Yeah, it's a weird trip. You know, when you look at it, you're like, that's not utopia. That's like an actual place. People actually voted for this and built a system.
Yeah, it's a functioning democracy.
Yeah, imagine. It's
I know.
Maybe
Dare
we'll
to
get back
dream. Dare to dream.
Yeah, you know, it's something to aspire to. But now you mentioned the cartoon kayfabe thing. Do you find yourself listening to more podcasts during this whole thing, or again, has your schedule and lifestyle changed? Not at all.
It's closer to like not at all. I mean, I can only listen to podcasts when I'm inking. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, like kayfabe, I listen to, the like New Yorker fiction, but that's once a month. So I keep meaning to get like an Audible subscription again and just download some books, because I'm not reading as much as I'd like to. You know, I mean, like,
there's Tiger King to watch. It's always
yeah. Well, no, I mean, I've just been reading like a lot of comics. I mean, I guess that's reading, but I mean, I need to like get into a novel. I mean, I should read a classic. I've been thinking about like filling in some gaps. Like I've never read Don Quixote, so maybe I should read that this summer.
That'll give you, you know, that'll take up a good chunk of the summer. I had to give myself, you know, an excuse or dispensation to read that Grant Morrison stuff. I'm like, Gil, it's okay. You don't have to be proving something on some grand recording angels list of highfalutin books you've read. Just go read 70 issues of whatever the fuck Grant Morrison was trying to do back in the 90s. It's okay. You can have fun. You can, you know.
What was he trying to do? I've never read The Invisibles.
Oh, it's absolutely nuts. It's spy, mystical, cosmological nature of storytelling, thriller, superpower, blah, blah, blah. Every life is a cover story of some kind or another. You have no fucking idea what's going on. But there's a stretch. Early on, the artwork is also terrible.
Really?
The production's god-awful in the beginning. It's Steve Yao who did... it shifts all these different artists. But at one point, Steve Yao is drawing it, who did Zenith with Grant Morrison, which was wonderful. This British comic they did, one of the few superhero books I've ever enjoyed as an adult. But this thing, like, there's a Jill Thompson run that looks, the characters all look like mannequins, like nobody can function. Eventually he gets Phil Jimenez and it just looks like George Perez doing this weird type of comic. But yeah, it takes a
detail, while. Like legally detail,
yeah, that hyper Perez style that Jimenez aped, basically, which I'm fine with. He was able to you know, handle that in a storyline that justified it. So, but yeah, otherwise, I have no goddamn idea. It's filled with all sorts of great concepts, a lot of which are 80s into 90s mysticism, techno, rave, ecstasy, blah, blah, blah sort of thing.
Of its time.
But with the internet just starting to form. And that's what's kind of neat about it, is all of this, where everything is headed, and, you know, like these brief glimpses of the future are completely wrong, which is fine. Like, everybody gets it wrong.
Yeah. Is it like utopian that like the internet's going to bring us all together?
No,
like
that's the whole thing.
They
don't quite get the internet. And that's what's neat about it. Or it's still seen in this kind of monolithic way, as opposed to, again, nobody gets what the actual applications are going to be like, which is, you know, I'm going to sit on my Nintendo Switch playing Animal Crossing or whatever, and, you know, or I'm just going to post pictures of my food. Like, something like that just wouldn't occur to anyone back in the 90s, that's the, you know, the way certain types of platforms would just take off.
Right.
So, yeah. So it's pretty neat to read in that respect as like an artifact, but it did have some ideas about control and power and where things were going that, you know, are applicable nowadays. So I'm kind of interested in these last 10 issues to see where he brings it all.
If he ties it up. You know that he's been the editor of Heavy Metal the past few years, right? Have you picked up any of those?
No. Stoya made a joke about that during our podcast, the adult film performer, because she'd said, you know, being at the AVNs and sitting at a table, tabling at the AVNs and having that line of people who want stuff signed was identical to when she was at Comic-Con and people were freaking out over Grant Morrison sitting next to her because she wrote some stuff that Dino drew for heavy metal. She's like, it's exactly the same. Like it's you know, they're not coming up to Grant with a fleshlight, but otherwise, yeah, it's the same starstruck or weird thing from the audience to the artist. So there's that.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Someday that'll be you at the AVN Awards.
Yeah. I hope so. Well, I mean, you know, my partner in crime with the New Yorker gags, Gustavo Turner, he's he works for XBiz, so he's he's a journalist for them, and he writes a lot about the industry. So yeah. Maybe it will be the AVN Awards.
You will get some sort of crossover that way.
Yeah,
that could be something. But when you mentioned the not adding podcasts and also not going out, is there any sort of binging besides the comics? Are you doing the crazy Netflix series or?
I mean, we're what are we? I mean, we're late to a few things. So we watched High Maintenance. You know that show on HBO?
I heard about it, but I haven't seen it. It sounds like it would be good for you.
Yeah, I wonder why. It's like an anthology show. It's like these short little pieces. I mean, they're almost like little Eric Romer movies or something. And it centers around this pot dealer that just goes from just client to client through all these neighborhoods and different class and but it's funny. It's like a quiet humor to it, but they're really addicting, so we just blew through all those, and now we're watching Silicon Valley. I haven't watched any of those, and they're like
first couple seasons are really good. Eventually the formula keeps repeating in terms of we think we succeeded, things got flipped on us at the last second, and then things worked out in a way we didn't expect.
Yeah, I mean that's just it. I mean, that's just TV in general. Just that writing formula. I mean, Kyler mentions something on her interview with you about her new work, which is just she's writing something that's just non-linear. I mean, all her work is kind of like that, and that's what makes it so great. It's she's just trying to just capture everyday life, and I mean that's just way more interesting to me than this TV show formula.
I was so hoping that she was going to say that she was working on some sci-fi epic thriller, like the thing that you want to do also, that Kyler has that in her back pocket, that someday when I have time, I'm doing the giant sci-fi space opera thing that I've always wanted to do.
She's been playing around, man. I mean, do you follow her Instagram? She...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so she had that narwhal drawing that she put in there.
Yeah, it's always interesting seeing her non-comics work and just seeing the differences in style, with the painting stuff versus the panel to panel. But
we have one of her paintings. I bought one of her paintings.
Nice. Yeah. I should do that to support you guys, or support artists in general, because
yeah, man,
this
cough it
this
up.
Doesn't pay. I know, I suck. Maybe I'll buy one of your gags next time we're at a con. Oh, we're not going to have any cons.
Oh, I know, man. Yeah, well, the penny book that's coming out through Chronicle, my big mainstream debut, that got pushed to the spring. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe fall 21 there might be at least a cab. But
I just don't know.
I was hoping for Mocha next year, but yeah, I mean, well, no one knows. But no, you're plugged in more than most, so
that's why I didn't want to say anything. But I don't think there's going to be a thing till fall of next year at the earliest. But
that's what I was saying. Fall 21, definitely not this fall.
Yeah,
I mean, I applied to CXC and got in, and I don't know. I mean, I was going to do it because of the penny book, but that's not happening. So I should write them. And
again, I think everything's in a holding pattern. A lot of this stuff is tied into you can't announce a cancellation too early because of insurance and liabilities and all that stuff with the venues. So it's like the SPX interview that Warren did in the Comics Journal, where you read between the lines. It's pretty obvious they're not having SPX this year.
Yeah,
but he can't say that. And I've worked with the same hotel for an event, and if you cancel too early, you're on the hook. So you sort of need to pretend it's still going forward until
that makes sense.
But
doesn't he have some deal with them about for the venue, like the next, but it runs out in next year or something?
Oh, I
You
don't
feel
know.
about
In my case, I go year to year with the show that I do, but I'm sure
that?
with
Okay.
an event like his, they probably did, work out deals for multiple years.
Right.
But yeah, that's all going to be up in the air, regardless of whether it had an expiration on it. But
Hmm.
what show do you think you missed the most?
Jesus. I don't know. I mean, maybe CXC just because I love the Billy. But I only did it that 1 year, but it definitely I was hooked. I mean, it's going to be sad, you know, like
Yeah,
the next one, obviously, and there's going to be that shadow
yeah,
over it.
missing Tom.
But yeah, I mean, like Cab. I love Cab in Brooklyn. Um, that's a great show because Gabe is an expert, like curator.
Mhm.
I guess like those two.
Yeah,
Well, I'm like TCAF. I love TCAF too. I love
that
making that trip up to Toronto.
would have been this weekend.
That's right.
Yeah, I left it in my calendar
Hmm.
just to remind myself. I'm supposed to be at a show in Philadelphia right now for Pharma, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then I was going to come home Thursday, Friday morning, fly up to Toronto, and
Hmm.
you know, it's weird. Like Eric Reynolds and I talked about how not for a podcast, but just how it's weirdly appropriate that there are no cons or festivals for at least a year after we lose Tom.
Oh yeah, it's
That
true. Yeah, it was already going to
it's
be
like
sad anyways. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, even like that. I mean, the like Cab that happened like right before he died was. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm sure it's like hindsight. Just like
Yeah,
not seeing him like walking around. It's like, oh shit.
I'm with you.
So.
It's I was dreading what this weekend would be like.
Mhm.
I had no idea how I would go to a show without Tom.
Yeah.
That he was supposed to be, especially one that he and I would always go out for. Amy and I would go out for a great dinner.
Yeah. Did your thing.
Yeah, and the idea that we were going to go into this and not have that happen, it filled me with dread. But I knew it was something we were going to have to do, and now everything's on hold. So kind of changes the whole process, I guess.
Yeah, it sucks. I like still like, as like a reflex, go to Comics Reporter every morning. Like I always like type that C. I'm like, fuck.
Yeah. I was corresponding with Evan Dorkin, and he said one of the things he really was bummed about for his birthday was that there wasn't a birthday announcement from Tom. That
yeah,
this is the first year in many years there isn't a happy X birthday. But,
dude, my birthday's in November too, so
it's going to doubly suck.
Oh, speaking of Dorkin, are you going to post the New York thing?
Yeah, I've got to. That's part of the emotional fallout thing. I have to sit down with 2.5 hours of everybody's tributes to Tom, process the actual audio and record the little intros and just put myself through that again, which I just haven't had the will to do so far.
Yeah.
But,
no, I mean, I totally understand, but I was just, I mean, I was shocked by Evan Dorkin's like speech, man.
Yeah,
it was epic.
It was partly what he talked about in Columbus also. He had some of the same points. But yeah, it's you guys are in an industry that is not healthy.
No.
And doesn't treat its labor. We're not learning. It's being illustrated in front of us how much of America is about labor that is not treated fairly.
Yeah.
The creative arts are, a different thing, but it's still a nightmare.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's been a dismantling for many decades now. But yeah, I mean, the comics have always been notoriously bad. I mean, that was the whole thing with, well, in the 80s and 90s, there was that big transition, Yeah. Well, I guess it started with like Neil Adams, right? Like in the 70s, trying to get Jack Kirby's art back. But then, there was like all the creator rights summits that Scott McCloud and all those guys were involved in.
Right in Northampton.
Yeah, Northampton. That's right.
If only you mattered at that point, you could have been part of it.
That's right.
You were
a hero. I always want to be a hero.
High school.
Yeah, post high school. I know. It's like 1986. That's like the big year that everyone talks about. That was like, I mean, was Evan doing books? Yeah, like
no, barely, because I was 15, so he would have been like 18 or 19. So he was probably just starting Hectic Planet and all that stuff.
But,
God, we're too fucking old, man. Anyway, last question: where do you and Alex want to go once you can comfortably go somewhere, whether it's a restaurant, bookstore, going to visit the family? Is there a
number one
thing you guys have talked about, or is it different for the two of you?
Well, no, I mean, obviously, I guess like family, like that would be the safe.
Yeah. Okay.
answer.
So with that out of the way,
That would be the safe answer. But like after them, I mean, I want to go to the Millionaire Picnic, which is the comic store in Harvard Square. So I've been trying to support them as much as I can. Like they're doing like drop off stuff, but we had a trip that we booked in January to Madrid, so for September. So that's probably not going to happen.
No,
I mean,
but it's good of you to hope.
Maybe,
but
I mean, like Spain has lifted everything, but it might be one of those situations where they like quarantine you, right, for like 14 days before you can go.
Which could be an interesting vacation in itself, but yeah, I would probably hold off on that.
Yeah, I forget. Like, were you quarantined after Japan? Did they?
No.
Okay.
No,
you just slipped right through.
We came in. The weird thing was we landed maybe 12 hours in the air, 14 hours in the air, whatever it is. Everybody gets up, and the company that brought us there and they put us up in Polaris in business class. So we're up near the front of the plane. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets up to leave. We all get our bags, and then they tell us we have to sit down again because Customs and Border Patrol want these 5 parties off the plane first. And the guy, like the pilot, said repeatedly, this is not United policy. This is Customs and Border Patrol. This has nothing to do with United, just to explain that we're sorry. You have to sit for another 5 or 10 minutes after, 12-hour flight.
Jeez.
And we were all trying to figure out, like, what are they all going to be Latino or Arabic names? This is coming from Japan. Completely random. None of us had we're all looking at each other like, why would those 5 parties, whatever, that's fine, get them off the plane, then we'll go next.
Yeah.
And then a few days later I was down in DC, and everybody was end of February, nobody thought anything of handshaking, hugs, and all that stuff. I'm like, fuck all of you. I'm not touching anybody. I just got back from Japan, and none of you should be touching anyone either. So
yeah, I know,
I don't get it.
So cavalier. 2
weeks later we all got the picture, but
right. Yeah, I know. I keep thinking about that too, because like late February, I mean, people were like avoiding all the Chinatown restaurants here. So, since we're good liberals, we decided to like go and, frequent them and just, well,
that was one that made no sense to me. Like, why would Chinese workers in America have any exposure to
exactly
that? Yeah.
I mean, it was racism, just people freaking out.
It's just people's thing, but we just lucked out, and we concluded afterwards, like, if that's the last trip we get to take for a long time, we really came out ahead. Like we were put up in fantastic hotels, got to see these great sights, and this whole thing. I'm like, so we don't go anywhere for a while. We have a bunch of really good memories to fall back on right now.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, you're lucky.
Yeah, haha. That's because I didn't go into comics. Anyway, we'll talk later on. I hope things stay easy for you guys. That there's no craziness around your building or anything.
Thanks, man. Likewise.
Cool. And we'll talk soon.
Okay, sounds good, Gil. Thanks again.
And that was Karl Stevens. Go check out his books like The Winner, The Lodger, and Failure, and go check out his gags in the occasional issues of the New Yorker. I'll put a link to his New Yorker search page in the show and episode notes for this one, so you can see all of his contributions there. As he mentions, the book about his cat, Penny, has been rescheduled to next year, but I'll get word out about that when it's available. Now, Karl's on Twitter and Instagram as Karl Stevens Art, KarlStevensArt. So it's Karl Stevens, Karl with a K. Anyway, you can go check out his work there. Look him up online. Doesn't have a strict website, but the Instagram is really good in terms of getting an idea of what his output is like beyond just the gag comics. And we'll be back tomorrow with another COVID check-in episode. If you want to send me a little update to read on the air or have something you want to share with the listeners, let me know and we'll set something up. I'm at groth18, GROTH18 at gmail.com. You can find contact info at our websites, vmspod.com and chimeraobscura.com/VM. And on both of those sites, you can find a link to the COVID-19 sessions with all of these daily episodes, which began March 25th with Kate LaCour. You can also just subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show via iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcatcher you like. Our RSS feed's available at both of those websites, so that way you can make sure you get every episode and can go through our archives too. Now, in the before time, I always recorded these shows in person, but now I'm using Zencastr.com to record remotely. If you're interested, Zencastr is ZENCASTR, so no final E. Basically, it allows you to record both your audio track and the guest's audio track instead of getting both of your inputs, so you get a clearer signal from both sides. There's a free hobby level that's limited in terms of the amount of participants you can have on a call and the amount of post-production Zencastr does. I don't use the post-production because I do my own thing. But anyway, pro level's $20 a month. Hobby is free. My Patreon supporters more than cover what I spend on the show nowadays, between this and my web hosting, especially since I'm not spending money anymore on parking and tolls and subway trips and coffee for all those in-person shows. So if you can spare anything, don't give it to me. Give it to the artists, writers, and other people who are in need. Go find their Patreons, GoFundMes, Kickstarters, Indiegogos, tip jars, whatever it is, and show them some support. If you'd rather go institutional, then go find a charity, local food bank, whatever you can. Go find the places and people in need and give them a hand. I'm Gil Roth. It is May 7th, 2020, and this was a bonus episode of my Virtual Memories Show podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Keep the conversation going, stay safe, and wash your damn hands.